Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 255. I'm John Davis, of course, and joining me today, our senior executive producer, Dave Scribner.
Hi there.
Our over-the-edge reporter and podcast producer, Greg Carlos.
Hello from the MotorWeek offices.
Indeed. And our very special guest, our online auto parts expert, Tom Taylor. Tom, welcome.
John, thanks for having me.
Great to have you back with us. Well, we've got a lot of topics today. We're actually going to spend quite a bit of time on things that are really right up Tom's alley. But we also do have our review of the 2022 Honda Civic, a new generation of Civic. And Greg will be leading us off on that. But let's start. I know this is something that basically anyone that is buying a car for a long time is concerned with. And I know almost every car I've ever bought, I bought it, one of these. And I'm talking about automotive service manuals. You know, those big, thick books that basically told you everything about at least the same information that most of the automotive technicians had in getting into the nitty gritty into your car. Tom, are they gone? I mean, I understand that basically the companies that used to print these aren't even printing them anymore. What are people supposed to do?
The big names was always Chilton and Haynes. And about 20 years ago, those two companies combined. So if you have a car built in the last 20 years or so, if you buy a Chilton manual and a Haynes manual, the content's identical. So you just really need to buy one or the other. And then last year in 2020, another company, Digital Info Pro, I think it's called, bought the Haynes Chilton company. And soon after, they announced they're not going to make any more manuals for new cars. They're going to come up with some new sort of system. I'm guessing it'll be online. The company's is Digital Info Pro, I think is the name of it. Their company's background is databases for professional mechanics in Europe. So I'm guessing it'll be an online system.
Kind of like all data is here for mechanics.
Exactly.
You have a subscription service. You can log in and get the repair orders and the time sequence, things like that from all data.
And service bulletins too. Yeah.
They promise that they'll keep printing and making the disc copies of the manuals for older cars indefinitely. So that's good news. And they've made Haynes and Chilton made print manuals up for up through 2018 for some cars. So today's newer cars that are moving into the time when they need service, there'll still be manuals available. And then the factory service manuals are still around, and there's companies that are licensing those, and there's actually more factory service manuals becoming available for older cars every year. Detroit Iron, Graham, or a couple of companies that reproduce the service manuals, and for some old classics, they even reproduce like sales brochures from the car dealers, which are kind of fun, and owner's manuals, and So yeah, overall, it's good news. I understand why it's becoming harder to do the print manuals. It's hard to figure out what to even include in there. They were grouped by model, and if the model, there might be an all-wheel drive version, a hybrid version, an all-electric version. Which car do you disassemble to come up
with the manual? Yeah.
And people basically just want to look up YouTube videos now anyway. I can't tell you how many times I'm around a car and it's just like, well, I could go to the library or look it up online, but YouTube's right here and I'll just have somebody walk me through it.
I've done that, no problems.
The problem that comes there is that you don't know who it is. You don't know how accurate the information is. Sometimes they're just really bad at making videos, and it's like, okay, the information's there. Maybe the knowledge is in your head, but there's actually like a market for somebody who has the production capability and the knowledge. So, I mean, I feel like that could be the future of, service manuals.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just thinking about the YouTube thing. I mean, there's guys that are and gals that are really conscientious about trying to do a good job, and I just replaced the oil pump recently on my '79 Chrysler 360, and I found a YouTube video where somebody had done that on a truck, and they were super conscientious about having torque specs and everything, but they messed up the which gasket overlaps which in the
Ooh.
back. And it's like I was lucky I had the service manual to say, no, this is the right way to do it. So, and then new, more flexible gaskets, that vehicle will probably be fine too. But yeah, just little details. It's good to have a couple different sources.
My problem with all that is that means you've got to have a tablet or something right there with you.
Oh, right.
And let's say you're flat on your back, you've got your hands full of grease, you're to the point where you need to go back and refer to the video. It was one thing to get a grimy old, shop manual kind of, messed up a little bit with greasy fingerprints. Is it a real substitution?
Need your VR goggles, John, so you can swipe in the air. And
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess I'm just old fashioned. I just still like to have the pages, but go ahead.
So children like myself was replaced as this flashlight holder. Now they had magnetic lights and lights that can go anywhere, tiny lights. So I was out of a job working on cars with my dad. But now maybe, my son, soon to be son, will be holding my iPad for me while I'm working on the car.
When you work on your car, Tom, and you basically have to refer to a video or something, do you have any tricks, or is it a matter of, just back and forth?
Yeah, I do a lot of printing. I print out pieces of paper and I take notes. But I know my kids would be, this is an opportunity to use my old laptop or my old phone or whatever for the greasy stuff, and I need a new phone or new gizmo for the day-to-day stuff. So
you're offering up their phones as the old one, and you buy them a new one.
Yeah, I do have a hand-me-down phone where they have the new phone. So.
Oh, you're a good father. You're a good dad. Well, like you said, the good news is not only are they not going away, but maybe we're going to actually have more sources of them, of which obviously you can go online and purchase. We are doing this show sort of at the end of spring, and a lot of people have been asking us, is there anything new or something that we should do in spring cleaning that maybe we haven't thought of before? And Tom, when we were planning this podcast, you mentioned a lot of aluminum parts. We've got more and more aluminum parts on cars, and maybe they need some special attention in the spring. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, as cars last longer, there's more aluminum parts, and as they last longer, aluminum has time to corrode and wear down. I opened the hood of my 92 Dodge van, and it's sort of like a sandcastle, and the tie's starting to come in. All the edges are just kind of worn off a bit. And the aluminum corrodes immediately if it's exposed to air. And usually that layer of corrosion, the aluminum oxide, it protects it. But if you constantly wear it away, like the under hood conditions, salty water coming up and abrading it away, then you get that, it actually erodes away. So springtime, the most apparent thing on a lot of cars are the aluminum wheels. And you might be tempted to, hey, I can make this a little bit shinier, putting a buffing wheel on it or something. You got to keep in mind that there's probably a coating on there. I mean, there certainly was some sort of coating on there originally, which could be like a clear coat, or it could be the part was dipped in some sort of acid bath or something to create the right consistency of aluminum oxide across the surface and the right appearance. So you got to be careful you're not buffing off or scraping off the coating, and you'll actually hurt the appearance of the part. If you have some sort of polishing compound, make sure it's made for aluminum, that it's supposed to replace what it takes off with some sort of coating.
What about things that you don't necessarily see and you're not that much concerned about bringing them back to a polished condition? I'm thinking about aluminum suspension parts. In my case, I was just rolling up the tonneau cover on my pickup truck, and I noticed all the aluminum ribs were covered in corrosion. And I looked online and I found as many things on there about how to basically get the oxide off as you could possibly imagine. what would you do if you wanted to, just protect those parts a little bit, get some of the corrosion off, do a little spring cleaning?
Yeah, protection was the main thing. I would paint them. I would clean off
Paint them.
the oxide that's crumbling away, and if you want to keep the appearance looking the same, you can use clear coat. But if you don't care about, or you want to have another fun color, then just paint them with your favorite color of paint.
Interesting.
And some of the paint manufacturers, Rust-Oleum or somebody, might have paint that they say is better for exposed aluminum than others. I'm not sure.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
That's the peel off paint would work. I've seen them use that for wheels as well. The plastic spray on peel off stuff, which gives a look and also is removable or replaceable down the road.
That's another good point. The last thing that before we move on to our look at the Honda Civic, there's a lot of stuff in the news post-pandemic about the lack of rental cars at airports as people are starting to travel a little bit more. I read one thing where it said somebody had rented an economy car and they gave them the keys to a full-size pickup truck, and people are getting in these vehicles. They have no clue what they're driving. I think, Tom, you've probably done more traveling than even us over the years. What do you recommend to people that come to you and say, look, I'm getting ready to rent a small car. What should I know before I hop in or drive away anyway?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the pickup truck. That's been real common even before the pandemic. I wouldn't mess with the economy car, compact, mid-size, full-size stuff. That doesn't seem to mean anything anymore. Part of it is there's not those standard small, medium, large cars. There's all these crossovers and stuff. But I just always reserve the economy. And I think the smallest thing I've had in the last year is a Mazda 3, and that was kind of my choice. But there's often pickup trucks in the economy section. I'm not sure why, if it's the truck manufacturers are giving them deals, or they're not as popular for people that want a smaller car for the city. But I'd say the majority of my economy cars over the past year have been full-size Ram and Ford.
Really?
Pickups.
Wow.
So you really are the rule that I was talking about. So that's cool.
I just read where they're renting U-Haul vehicles in Hawaii because they're cheaper. Tourists are renting U-Haul trucks and driving around because they can save money.
Yeah, if you don't put that many miles on it, that's the way U-Haul usually gets their money, is by miles. So. And the economy section is often, there's these cars that are in limbo. They have out-of-state plates, and somehow that doesn't quite fit in their system. So you go to the economy section, and I've had full-size or minivans. There was a Nissan Pathfinder that had a sign on the window that said, it had Ontario plates, and it says, "Please take on one-way north." So the rental car company is trying to get it back to Canada somehow. So I've had super good luck with the economy. I enjoy different vehicles. So hey, Mazda 3 this week, Ram 1500 next week, and I've never been cramped. The hardest vehicles to find might actually be if on the reservation sites it always says Chevy Spark or similar. If you actually want a Chevy Spark or small car, they may not have them. That may be, if you really want you prefer small vehicles, or you're going to be in a big city or something, those may be harder to find.
When you get to, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you get to the lot though, do you just hop in and drive off, or do you actually do a little reconnoiter around the vehicle inside and out before you take to the road? I must admit, I usually don't. So. Yeah.
And they're, with some of the COVID, well, first, let me say that the staff at all the rental car places during the pandemic have been amazing. I went to the counter. The lady behind the counter said, "Wait a minute." She disappears. I see a Ford F-150 pull up in the circular drive in front of the airport, and it's her, and she's washing my rent-a-car and cleaning it inside. And she comes back to the desk and gives me the keys. It's like they're working their butts off, but part of I've seen that they're trying to reduce the paperwork, and sometimes you don't go to the desk anymore. You just go right up to the lot. And I asked for the paperwork. they may have a plan that, okay, we're not doing paperwork for COVID or to ease things, but I don't know if it's a one-way rental. I don't know if the next people are going to say, okay, you don't have the damage form showing all the dings and scratches and bonks on this vehicle. Or you get pulled over by the state police in a neighboring state, and he doesn't know that rent-a-car companies aren't giving out paperwork anymore. So he's like, well, I don't know if you own this vehicle or stole it or what. So if you ask for paperwork, I've always been able to get it. Like even when you exit some airports, they'll have a gate and a gate attendant. That person has been able to print it out for me. So yeah, I would take the time to ask for the paperwork. And when I return cars, I sometimes I can't. They'll like, we'll email this, but I try desperately to get paperwork to show that, yeah, I brought back this $40,000 car and turned it in. And I've actually gone to the desk inside the airport sometimes to ask for that. It's like, okay, the person that I turned the car into can you print me out a receipt? Yeah. And if it's a business trip, I'll need a receipt for, submitting for reimbursement. So yeah,
some good tips there.
Great.
Yeah, I know the one thing I do is I take my cell phone and just walk around the car and take pictures of everything, even if it's an unblemished body panel, to make sure I've got some record that this is the way I got the car. Yep.
Yeah, last week I rented a Jeep Compass Trailhawk economy car. That was like a new level, like a PhD level of weirdness for renting cars. It had 77,000 miles on it, which is like double what I've ever seen on a rent-a-car before. It was covered with dings and chips in the windshield and stuff. And it was a vehicle where it's like, not only walk around, but this car has so many miles on it. I look at rent-a-car miles as like, it's like dog years versus human years. 77,000 miles is a lot.
Yeah.
So that vehicle, I took time to go through the screens and look at all the oil pressure and everything that it would reveal. And I saw the 3 of the tires were 10 pounds overinflated and one was about 8 pounds underinflated. And so I took it I stopped at a tire store and they adjusted the air pressures, and then it stopped. I thought the struts needed to be replaced or something. It was just very bouncy, and there was clicking from the, I guess, ABS parts in the rear end and the rear wheel hubs.
It's
once
like
I got the air. Yeah, once the air was pumped up, it was fine. So.
Well, I mean, it's a trail hawk, so maybe somebody was taking it on the trail. Who knows?
I don't know, man.
The best.
Not the car ride.
I wonder if you're going to get back with it.
I made it back. The best surprise, I got to the hotel and I pull out my suitcase and I see there was a compartment under the cargo floor. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Wonder what I can put in there. And I open it up and there's a couple, a grocery bag tied shut sitting there, just sitting. And it was like kind of a horror movie thing. Do I open that? Do I pretend I didn't see that? So is it full of $100 bills, or is there a human head in there? So,
used diaper, probably.
So I carefully pried it open because curiosity. I'm a cat, I guess, and it was full of underwear. And it was funny. My next thought was like, well, I wonder if this is my size. at that point, it's funny how it goes to your head, but at that point I said, let's wrap this up, and I carefully plucked it out and put it in the nearby trash can. And so yeah, the car was super clean for COVID, but yeah, forget the bag of underwear in the back. I guess that somebody's dirty laundry they stashed back there, forgot about.
Ain't that an unfortunate fact of life? The underwear is never the right size.
Yeah, it might have been not the right gender either. I just saw the brand name on the waistband.
Well, I think this has been a first time conversation on a MotorWeek podcast.
First time we've ever mentioned underwear.
I don't think we've done this before.
255 podcasts.
Well, I have absolutely no transition. Thank you, Tom. We should probably move along if we don't want this podcast to last 2 hours. The one car we were going to talk about this week was the unveiling of the new generation of the Honda Civic. And over the life of the Civic, they've seemed to have this policy that they'll do a generation where they've done major revamping, then the next generation's kind of evolutionary, and this one seems a little bit evolutionary. But Greg, why don't you walk us through what the 2022 Civic, at least the sedan that we've seen, has to offer, and what it looks like and where it fits.
That's a pretty good point, John, because that last generation, so this is the 11th, the 10th generation was quite a radical change. I mean, and I think it got a lot of good press for its looks. So this 11th generation, it almost like, to me, it kind of looks a little retro. So they call the design like a thin and light design. And that's actually, of all the design terms I've ever heard for cars, like this one might be the most descriptive, because it's like the front end gets like very narrow. The headlights are thin and wide, and the grille, contrary to a growing trend, is actually quite small. The lower grille gets a little bit bigger, but it's very horizontal, both inside and out. But like I said, it's kind of hard to describe, but when you hear that it's a thin and light, and that's their term, that's exactly what it looks like. It's kind of hard to explain. But so inside they've brought it up to modern technology. It starts with a standard 7-inch touchscreen. You can go up to a 9-inch. There's digital screens within the instrument cluster. And then, so to the performance, they have carryover engines. They're starting with the 2-liter, naturally aspirated, 158 horsepower, 138 pound-feet of torque. That's like your intro basic engine. You can go a little bit small. You jump up by going smaller to the 1.5-liter turbo 4. And that gives you 180 horsepower, 177 pound-feet of torque, both around 35, 36 miles per gallon at best, which is pretty decent. The downside of the powertrain, depending on who you are, is that it's CVT only right now in the sedan. When an SI comes out, and probably the Type R will see the manual, they're not saying that the manual's gone, but if you want a Civic sedan right now, it's going to be a CVT.
It's interesting you mentioned retro, the interior and the exterior. I really thought the interior was kind of retro in one aspect. The dash is very linear. You've got these 3 controls right in the middle, but if it wasn't for the touchscreen mounted on top, that bottom part of that instrument panel could have come out of something from the 1960s. So it's kind of an interesting and a little bit odd for them combination of very modern and a bit retro. I like the look of it myself. I thought it was pretty cool.
And they're back to knobs. So you have a volume knob, you have knobs for the climate control, which if you've listened to our podcast a lot, you probably think we're just complaining about the smallest thing. But I mean, it's so frustrating when you can't just turn up or turn down the stereo with a quick roll of the knob. I do want to note that they actually made a pretty big deal, not necessarily about the Honda sensing, but a safety feature, which is like they're calling it a revolutionary front airbag system, because what the driver gets is like a donut-shaped airbag, which is supposed to like control, in the event of an accident, control the head of the driver so they can better keep it in one area to prevent the situation where you would get a brain injury. So they actually made a big deal about that, which I feel like it's been kind of quiet in the airbag industry lately.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't heard. I didn't recognize it. That's probably one of the first advances in a driver's side front airbag in a long time. It's interesting. Dave, any comment? You've seen the pictures like the rest of us.
Right. I just seemed like it wasn't an evolutionary design. It's the right Civic for right now. There's still room to grow it in the future and meet future demands. But right now, it's all about the new technologies, things like that. People want that right now. So they met that need, and it's a fine car.
Tom, in your business, are you seeing any downside to these touchscreens being mounted on the top of the dash versus down in the dash? Is it same kind of repairs? Are they more susceptible to sun damage or anything like that?
I think it's still too early. We haven't seen any. They're just not failing. Either one failing at fast enough rate to know yet if one's better than the other. So,
well, that's a good thing. Okay, well, let's move on to our lightning round. Basically, we've got a topic that our producer Greg here has picked out of the press, and let's get at it. There's been a recent flurry of new vehicle press releases revealing new off-road minded trim packages. For instance, we've seen most recently the Subaru Outback Wilderness. There's a Toyota Sienna Woodland Special Edition, Ford Explorer Timberline. I think there was a Pathfinder model this a couple of years ago. They kicked that off. Is this a coincidence, or are manufacturers seeing some sort of trend with customers? What do you think?
I think it's a trend based on COVID. People are finally trying to get out and travel alone into the outback areas, excuse the term. Toyota said as much in their press release that towing rates are up. People are camping more, buying more RV trailers, and trying to get out and do more away from people, but still get out and do things and have some activity. So I think it's a trend that they're jumping on top of. Also, I would say I put the Santa Cruz in that category, that sport activity vehicle, little pickup truck they came out with. Toyota with the Sienna, they're donating money to the National Environmental Education Foundation for every of the Woodland series purchased, up to $250,000 or something. So they're putting a charity aspect into it as well. It could be good marketing, could be corporate citizenship, who knows? But it's a trend.
Greg, anything to add?
Yeah, I don't really have any numbers to back it up. I think we hear all these stories of people wanting to go out and do the things that Dave said, and maybe that's true because, I mean, we're hearing about it, but maybe I'm a little cynical. I kind of feel like a lot of people like just the look of it more so than the functionality of it. And I can't blame them. I mean, it looks good. The off-road packages tend to be some of the cooler looking vehicles. I mean, you see them with Jeeps all the time, Rubicons, and how many, perfectly clean Jeep Rubicons do you see? You know what I mean? Like, and they look good and people are willing to pay the extra for them and not necessarily use them as they're intended.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of looking tough. I mean, they can't build enough and tough looking trucks, and I think it started with the big mouth grills over at Ram and Dodge, and now it's worked its way into everything, and people want that capability. Look, I'm not really sure that adding a half to an inch worth of ground clearance is going to give you that much more true rough and tumble abilities, but you're right, they look pretty cool. Tom, any impression? You live in the great Northwest, where people get out an awful lot more than they probably do around here in the Mid-Atlantic.
I really think it's a good idea that the manufacturers are smart. It's equipment that's already on a lot of vehicles. A lot of vehicles have all-wheel drive for rain and snow. So why not add switches that let you choose between rain and sand and snow and all these things that the car is already doing automatically? It's already through all the ABS sensors and the all-wheel drive system. It's all there. So yeah, gussy it up with switches and make it seem
opportunity
it's kind of
marketing.
emphasizing what you have.
Yeah.
What was that, Dave?
Opportunity marketing.
Could be. Unfortunately, because of the chip shortage, they can't build anything. So we've got all these interesting new models that we're gonna have to wait. Which brings us to sparking about a big thing about off-roading is tires. And we actually have a viewer question about tires. And Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're kind of our resident guru on all things have to do with parts and mechanics today. This is from Gary, who says he's just bought a set of Pirelli winter tires and would like to know how to handle directional tire rotation. Wants to know if it's any different than summer directional tires. And directional tires mean basically they are meant to be mounted on one side of the vehicle. Tom, any advice? What would you do?
Yeah, I would just move them from front to back every year. Every winter, just switch the two, and it's simple. And then with the winter tires, I would be sure to take them off, but they wear faster if you get above 40 degrees and take them on the freeway or something. So yeah, don't think it's let's leave these on year round. So
the same rotation pattern that would apply to any directional tire for summer or all weather applies to winter, which makes sense.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, Gary, I hope that helps. And that was actually a pretty quick answer on it. Usually these questions, we have a lot more discussion, but I'm not sure what else you'd say. The only other thing I just might add is that if you have, and Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you've got non-directional winter tires, you'd still use the X pattern going from front one side to rear on the other, and vice versa.
Yeah, I'm not even sure those exist. If they're official winter tires, my personal experience is they're always one side or the other. Yeah, but yeah,
because the asymmetrical
I would say
tread. Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, good. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up this week's podcast. I want to thank everybody that's joined us today. Greg, Dave, and Tom, thank you very much for carving out the time in your day to join us. And I also want to thank all the folks behind the scenes, our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, of course, Greg, for producing this podcast, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Everybody out there, thanks very much for listening and viewing this week's MotorWeek podcast. Don't forget to watch MotorWeek on your local public television stations. Go to our website, motorweek.org. About the show is a tab up on the right-hand side. Pull it down, put your zip code in there, and you can find out where the local station is and, what time of day. Also, our friends over at the Motor Trend Cable Network. Most weeks we're on Tuesday nights at 7:30 for a new show premiere, and it runs various other times. Basically, if you've got a screen, you can watch us. Go to youtube.com/MotorWeek, and you can see just about everything we've done for a long, long time in the rearview mirror, including our marathons of all of our classics that Ben Davis puts together every once in a while. Till next time, thanks everybody out there. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.